Morning. So welcome everyone. Good morning. I'm Julie Lee, the chair of the Delta Stewardship Council, and we're here today for the council's consideration of the draft determination for the appeals of the 2024 through 2026 proposed geotechnical activities, which are a small subset of the geotechnical activities related to the Delta Conveyance Project. Let the record reflect that it is 9:34 on Thursday, January 23rd, 2025. And this hearing is being conducted at the California Natural Resources Building located at 715 P Street, room 221, Sacramento, California, and remotely via Zoom. There is an additional teleconference location at 612 G Street, Suite 101, the large conference room in Eureka, California. So in accordance with our Bagley-Keene requirements, we'll conduct a roll call of in-person council members to establish a quorum. Emma, can you lead us in a roll call for the council members?
Councilmember Burgess.
Here.
Councilmember Damrell. Here. Councilmember Waso. Here. Vice Chair Miller.
Here.
Councilmember Zingali.
I'm here in Eureka.
Chair Lee.
Here. Thanks, Emma. Okay, we have a quorum. Today, we're going to have a staff presentation followed by council member deliberations, public comment, and potentially a vote by the council. The council will be considering whether to adopt the proposed determination dismissing the appeals for lack of jurisdiction. Emma, can you please describe how the public can provide their comments today?
Anyone who would like to provide oral public comment during the public comment period for the hearing today should contact the council clerk via email at engage@deltacouncil.ca.gov or by telephone at 916-275-6824 and provide a name and organization if applicable.
Thanks, Emma. I want to remind the public that the council does not approve or reject certifications of consistency. The council's role here is as an appellate body, deciding appeals of an agency's self-certification. The scope of the council's review is set forth in the Delta Reform Act at Water Code sections 85225 through 85225.25. I also want to be very clear that the Delta Conveyance Project is not the subject of the certification for the 2024 through 2026 proposed geotechnical activities that was appealed. The council will not be making a decision today to approve or reject the Delta Conveyance Project. The 2024 through 2026 proposed geotechnical activities are a small subset of the geotechnical activities described in the CEQA Final Environmental Impact Report for the Delta Conveyance Project. I'm now going to ask council staff members Jeff Henderson and Ava Bush to provide the staff report on this item. Jeff?
Thank you, Chair Lee. Good morning, council members, parties to this matter, and interested members of the public. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Jeff Henderson, Deputy Executive Officer for Planning at the Delta Stewardship Council. I'm joined this morning by Eva Bush, an Environmental Program Manager who leads our regulatory unit. And we have a couple of different roles in today's presentation. I'm presenting today on the procedural history of this matter in my capacity as the Deputy Executive Officer for Planning for the Council. I did not contribute to the analysis of the appeals or formulation of the proposed findings. Eva will then summarize the draft determination and present the staff's recommendation to adopt the determination. Eva led the hearing team for this matter and can speak to aspects of the determination and proposed findings. So let's begin. Next slide. Actually, slides up, please.
Jeff, can you speak up just a little bit or move your mic a little closer? It's a little bit hard to hear you. Thank you.
Okay, next slide, please. So this morning, for the record, we'll again review the council's covered action authority and appeals process as we did at the December hearing. I'll then again describe the project before the council in this matter. Following that, Eva will summarize the draft determination on appeals and deliver the staff recommendation. We'll then look forward to council member questions, receive public comments on this agenda item, and then we anticipate a council vote. Next slide, please. So the council's covered actions authority sources from the 2009 Delta Reform Act, which established the co-equal goals of providing a more reliable water supply for California and protecting, restoring, and enhancing the Delta ecosystem. The co-equal goals shall be achieved in a manner that protects and enhances the unique cultural, recreational, natural resource, and agricultural values of the Delta as an evolving place. The Reform Act further charges the council to implement the Delta Plan, which is a comprehensive resource management plan for the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta and Suisun Marsh. As part of this charge, the council has regulatory and appellate authority over certain state and local public agency plans, programs, and projects in the Delta and the Marsh to ensure that they're consistent with the Delta Plan. These types of actions are known as covered actions. The Delta Plan itself establishes 17 regulatory policies, 13 in Article 3 and 4 in Article 2, adopted to meet objectives the legislature set in statute or inherent in the co-equal goals. And an agency carrying out, approving, or funding a covered action in the Delta must demonstrate a covered action's consistency with Delta Plan regulatory policies when it carries out, approves, or funds such an action. Next slide, please. Agencies demonstrate consistency with the Delta Plan by submitting to the council a written certification of consistency with detailed findings as to whether its covered action is consistent with the Delta Plan. Any person who claims that a proposed covered action is inconsistent with the Delta Plan, and as a result of that inconsistency, the action will have a significant adverse impact on achievement of one or both of the co-equal goals or implementation of government-sponsored flood control programs to reduce risks to people and property in the Delta, may appeal the certification of consistency no later than 30 days after the submission. That appeal must include specific factual allegations. Both written certifications and appeals are typically submitted online on the council's website, along with supporting documents, notices, and public comments received. Next slide, please. The council must hold a hearing on the appeal within 60 days of the filing of the appeal. A hearing for this matter was held at our last council meeting on December 19th, 2024. The council also must make a decision regarding appeals within 60 days of the hearing. We're gathered here today for that purpose. 3 options are established in the Delta Reform Act for such a decision. The council can deny the appeals, in which case the certifying agency may proceed with implementation. The council can remand the matter for reconsideration, in which case if the certifying agency decides to proceed, as modified to respond to the findings of the council, the agency shall file a revised certification of consistency, addressing the council's findings prior to proceeding with the action. The council can also dismiss appeals for a variety of reasons, including appeals that raise non-appealable issues, are outside the council's jurisdiction, or that fail to provide the required specificity to support the appellant's claims. As described in the publicly available draft determination, this is the option staff recommends to the council today. Next slide. In reviewing the certification appeals, the council applies what's known as the substantial evidence standard of review. Under this standard, the council does not independently review a covered action to determine its consistency with the Delta Plan, but the council does determine if substantial evidence in the record supports the department's certification that the activity is consistent with the Delta Plan in light of the appeals. The scope of the council's review is whether the certification is supported by substantial evidence in the record. And importantly, appellants carry the burden of demonstrating that the administrative record does not contain substantial evidence to support the department's findings. Next slide, please. This slide presents a timeline of the activities leading up to today's meeting regarding this matter. On October 8th, 2024, the department filed a certification of consistency for the 2024 to 2026 proposed geotechnical activities. On November 7th, the appeals we received were deemed filed. On November 13th, 2024, the department certified its record as full and complete. On December 19th, 2024, the council held a hearing on the appeals. On January 13th, 2025, the council provided notice of today's meeting. On January 17th, 2025, the council released a draft determination regarding this matter. And today, January 23rd, 2025, the council considers and may adopt that draft determination. Next slide, please. So I'll now briefly summarize the proposed project before the council today. The certification filed by the Department of Water Resources states that the proposed geotechnical activities are intended to support the planning and design of the Delta Conveyance Project and would be located in Sacramento, San Joaquin, Contra Costa, and Alameda counties from north of the town of Hood to Bethany Reservoir in the south. The certification describes the proposed geotechnical activities as follows. The 2024 to 2026 proposed geotechnical activities are proposed to collect valuable data to refine the Delta Conveyance Project alignment and Delta Conveyance Project design. The 2024 to 2026 proposed geotechnical activities consist of soil borings, cone penetration tests, and water quality tests. These investigations are expected to yield important data about soil properties and water quality. Next slide, please. This data, in turn, will inform the planning and design of the Delta Conveyance Project. Continued planning and design efforts will assist DWR in identifying and applying the applicable provisions of the Delta Plan when submitting a certification of consistency for the future implementation of the Delta Conveyance Project. DWR did not originally plan to submit a certification of consistency for these activities. DWR does not understand these activities to constitute initiating the implementation of the Delta Conveyance Project. Rather, DWR understands these activities to be preliminary investigations related to the Delta Conveyance Project's planning and design, which DWR understands to be separate from the Delta Conveyance Project's implementation. Next slide, please. So in its certification, the department certified that all 17 Delta Plan policies do not apply to the proposed geotechnical activities, as shown on the screen. Next slide, please. The council received 4 timely appeals from the following parties: San Francisco Baykeeper, Winnemem Wintu, Shingle Springs Band of Miwok Indians, California Indian Environmental Alliance, Friends of the River, Center for Biological Diversity, Save California Salmon, California Sport Fishing Protection Alliance, Golden State Salmon Association, and Restore the Delta, a group referred to as San Francisco Baykeeper et al. Council also received a timely appeal from the South Delta Water Agency, or SDWA, an appeal from the County of Sacramento, Sacramento County Water Agency, Sacramento Area Sewer District, and the City of Stockton, or the City of Sacramento et al., and an appeal from the County of San Joaquin, Central Delta Water Agency, and local agencies of the North Delta, or San Joaquin County et al. Next slide, please. So this slide summarizes the 17 Delta Plan policies and identifies in the matrix which appellant group appealed each policy, and it spans 2 slides. Next slide, please. Okay, I'll now turn things over to Eva to summarize the draft determination and proposed findings.
Can you hear me all? Yeah. Okay. Good morning, Chair Lee and council members. I will be, next slide. Next slide. Thank you. I will begin by addressing the 2 threshold issues raised by the appeals. 1, does CEQA govern certifications of consistency and prohibit the department from submitting a separate certification for the proposed geotech? 2, is the proposed geotech a covered action? Next slide, please. Issue 1, does CEQA govern certifications and prohibit a separate certification for proposed geotech? No. The department did not necessarily violate the Delta Reform Act by submitting a certification for proposed geotech separately from other activities described in the EIR for the Delta Conveyance Project. The council is an independent agency with power to regulate covered actions. CEQA does not govern the certification process except as specifically incorporated by council regulations. The council's covered action authority is not subordinate to regulatory authority of another agency. Next slide, please. Okay. The council regulations solely govern certifications of consistency and specifically address piecemealing concerns. Submitting more than one certification of consistency is not prohibited by council regulations, so long as the decision to do so is reasonable and made in good faith. Piecemealing concerns are addressed by the council's regulatory definition of significant impact as a criteria for covered actions, which requires that the project's incremental effect is considered together with the impacts of the other closely related past, present, or reasonably foreseeable future projects. Next slide, please. Issue number 2, is the geotech a covered action? And the answer is no. The council has authority to determine whether a project is a covered action when its appellate jurisdiction has been invoked. For that, there is a 2-part test. Is the proposed geotech a proposed action? Yes. Is the proposed action a covered action? No. And I'll break these 2 issues down in a minute. Because the proposed geotech is not covered by one or more of the Delta Plan policies, it is not a covered action. The council is not a permitting agency, so does not reject or approve certifications. The council may dismiss appeals on specific grounds, including lack of jurisdiction. Next slide, please. For the proposed action determination, we find the following. The project would occur in whole or in part within the boundaries of the Delta or Suisun Marsh. The project would be carried out, approved, or funded by the state or local public agency. It would have a significant impact on the achievement of one or both of the co-equal goals or the implementation of government-sponsored flood programs. Significant impact is both on its own or when the project's incremental effect is considered together with the impacts of other closely related past, present, or reasonably foreseeable future projects. Next slide, please. Is the proposed action a covered action? No. It would only be covered by one or more provisions of the Delta Plan. It would not be covered by one or more provisions of the Delta Plan, sorry. The provisions refer to the 13 Article 3 regulatory policies. The record supports the department's determination that the proposed geotech is not covered by a regulatory policy. All regulatory policies contain a provision describing what covered means for purposes of determining if a proposed action is a covered action. Appellants challenged ERP 5 and DPP 2, and I will break those down individually in a moment. Staff evaluated covered provisions for all 13 policies and none were met. Because the proposed geotech is not a covered action, GP1 policies, so mitigation measures, adaptive management, best available science do not apply. Next slide, please. So for the 2 individual policies appealed, ERP 5, the council's policy on invasive non-native species. The policy covers a proposed action that has the reasonable probability of introducing or improving habitat conditions for non-native invasive species. The department states that ERP 5 is not applicable because the proposed activities would result in minor disturbances with temporary impact mitigated by environmental commitments and best management practices. The appellants claim inconsistency with the regulation, stating that the department does not specify whether all vehicles will be cleaned and inspected, nor the clothing and footwear of personnel, both of which could reasonably result in the introduction of non-native invasive species. Next slide, please. For the analysis, the appellants do not claim the action could improve habitat conditions for non-native species or cite evidence that the concern rises to a reasonable probability. The appellants do not point to an invasive species standard for vehicles, clothing, and footwear. The department states best management practices address work vehicles and a limited number of field personnel with access the proposed sites. We have found that reasonable probability has not been established, and therefore ERP5 does not cover the proposed geotech. The appellants have failed to show that the department's determination that ERP5 does not apply is not supported by substantial evidence in the record. Next slide, please. The other policy appealed is DPP2 concerning the respect of local land use. The policy covers proposed actions that involve siting of water management facilities, ecosystem restoration, and flood management infrastructure. The department states that DPP2 does not apply because the proposed action only includes temporary information collection activities and does not involve physical placing or siting of facilities. The appellants claim that the proposed action includes placement of permanent components, namely grout to seal the borings, and that the purpose is to support water management facilities, so it is a water management facility. Further, that the proposed action will be in conflict with agriculture and the harvest water program. Next slide, please. For the analysis, the boreholes with PVC pipes used for water quality testing would not constitute a water management facility because the PVC pipes will be removed and boreholes will be filled after activities are concluded. The material left behind, cement bentonite grout, will not be used for ongoing water management. And although data collected may inform planning and design of the Delta Conveyance Project, actual siting of the Delta Conveyance Project is not an issue in this certification. The proposed action does not involve siting of a water management facility, and therefore DPP2 does not cover the proposed geotech. The appellants have failed to show that the department's determination that DPP2 does not apply is not supported by substantial evidence in the record. Next slide, please. The recommended findings, the draft determination finds that the appeals against the department on the 2024-2026 proposed geotechnical activities should be dismissed for lack of jurisdiction. This determination offers no further findings. That means no findings with respect to the Delta Conveyance Project and no findings with respect to any geotechnical activities that are not part of this certification. The department must file a certification of consistency for the Delta Conveyance Project. Next slide, please. Today, staff recommends, based on the analysis and findings in the draft determination, that the council adopt Resolution 2025-01, which in a relevant part would adopt the draft determination and the findings contained therein, and thereby dismiss the appeals pursuant to Water Code Section 85-225-10, Subdivision C, and California Code of Regulations, Title 23, Section 5034, Subdivision D. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Eva. Madam Chair, that concludes our presentation. I'm going to excuse myself from the table at this point, and Eva can help with questions.
Thanks, Jeff. All right, so I'll turn now to council members and we can discuss the draft deliberation and ask Eva any questions that we might have for staff. And can I see Daniel on my screen so that I can tell if he's raising his hand? There he is.
I have one question just on process.
Okay, turn my mic on.
It is on.
Oh.
I just have a question on process. We're gonna have a discussion. Are we gonna hear from the public as part of this? What is, in terms of making a motion, taking action? What is the process going to be in this
So we're
deliberation?
gonna deliberate, ask staff any questions, talk about any changes to the resolution we might want. Then we'll go to public comment. We'll hear the public comments and then I'll come back and ask for a motion.
Okay.
Yes, Councilmember Burgess.
Thank you. It's important to get these close. Just clarifying on page 24, I think it was your second to last slide. So you're recommending that we dismiss the appeals for lack of jurisdiction. And my question was, do our comments related to whether things are consistent go on the record? And I think from what you're saying is there's no further findings with respect to DCP. So is that so?
Where we left off, we were deliberating about the draft determination, and I believe that Mr. Aguilar was going to explain to us Councilmember Miller's question about CEQA.
Sure. So just to be very clear, everyone in California should comply with the CEQA process. All we're saying is that CEQA does not govern the certification of consistency process. The decision points out that the certification of consistency process is a separate process from CEQA under a different statutory scheme, the Delta Reform Act. It is this council that has been charged with regulating the covered actions in the certification of consistency process.
Right. Are there any other council member questions or comments for the staff? Anything about the draft determination we want to cover before we move on to public comment? Okay. Seeing now none, we will now open comment to members of the public. Those requesting to comment will be called on by the clerk to speak, and we ask that the public try to keep your comments to under 3 minutes in the interest of time. We respectfully request that if you agree with comments made by a prior speaker, that you simply state that fact and add any new information that you feel is pertinent to the issue. If a large number of people express interest in providing comments, we may request that the public shorten their comments so everyone has an opportunity to comment. So we'll now turn to Emma for our comment process.
All right, our first public comment is from Eric Boucher with the San Francisco Baykeeper.
Good morning, Chair League and council members. My name is Eric Busher. It's good to be back here after last month to again address the consistency determination for the proposed geotechnical activities. I'll be brief. I want to make just, I think, 2 general points. Number one, as Mr. Aguilar described and Ms. Councilmember Burgess, as your question pointed at, we think the best approach for the draft determination is that it be significantly shortened down to only address those threshold issue that is necessary to reach the determination that this was not a covered action. And staff's presentation this morning described 2 threshold issues. One, these piecemealing questions that get to the CEQA question that Councilmember Miller, you raised, as well as how piecemealing should not, cannot work under the specific regulations of the Delta Reform Act, pointing at the significant impact language and analyzing impacts of related or future likely projects. Respectfully, those are not, that threshold issue about piecemealing is not necessary for the council's determination that this is not a covered action. DWR's submission, as Ms. Bush articulated this morning, explained it did not think this was a covered action. It got to step 2 of the covered action checklist, said no, and then ignored the next instruction that said, if you answer no to step 2, don't go any further. Right? And so everything that happened after that ultimately was unnecessary because the staff and council have determined what DWR knew, this is not a covered action. And there's no need to go into an analysis that is ultimately academic to the outcome and based on hypothetical situations that may or may not occur in the future to grapple with what I take staff and the council to view as an important and relevant and weighty issue under the Delta Reform Act, which is how do we avoid the consequences of piecemealing, or how do we allow for separate covered actions, part of a larger one to be submitted if we need to. But that's not what's before you. What's before the council is one big covered action, the Delta Conveyance Project, and then one tiny little slice of that that is activities that are not a covered action. And as a result, deciding whether piecemealing can occur when you have a covered action that is part of a bigger one isn't actually the factual predicate that we're dealing with today. And you shouldn't go forward deciding that, offering an advisory opinion about what may or may not happen in the future. Right? I would suggest we ask courts all the time, or we prohibit courts from offering advisory opinions. We limit how regulatory agencies offer advisory opinions to specific facts. Don't offer an advisory opinion about a hypothetical, because what happens is that when the real situation presents itself, you will have considered this question in the abstract and missed or not raised or not thought about actual consequences that will come from real life situations. So respectfully, I agree with the council and the draft determination. This is not a covered action. And I would respectfully request and suggest that the portions of the opinion that, as Mr. Aguilar described, go any farther than what was necessary to make the no covered action determination be left out, as they are advisory and hypothetical and academic, and that the council should reserve and confront those important issues at a later date when they're actually presented. Unless there are questions, thank you very much for your time. Sorry. I apologize.
I'm sorry. But these were issues that were raised that were then deliberated on. So I'm struggling with this idea that the issues that you raised now shouldn't be included. I don't think I understand.
So yeah, I apologize if I confused that question. I agree, right? We made arguments about CEQA and its impact, about piecemealing. My colleagues, the other appellants, did as well. We also, one of the things that I discussed in December was DWR walked through the covered action checklist, said this has no impact on any policy at all under the Delta plan. The instructions are that's not a covered action, stop. And it submitted it anyway, right? So we made both of these arguments that staff addresses as the two threshold issues they identify. My suggestion is that if you once you get to the second threshold issue that Ms. Bush explained, that it's not a covered action under the Delta Reform Act, that can be the end. You don't need to answer the question of how CEQA may or may not impact that analysis, right? Or what the piecemealing regulations, other regulations in the Delta Reform Act, how those may apply in the future. And so I don't think you need to resolve those questions. I ultimately agree with my colleagues that submitted letters yesterday about the ultimate legal analysis that's in the staff determination or the draft determination as it relates to CEQA. I mean, I have a different opinion than staff does, but we don't need to resolve that issue today. The council doesn't need to resolve that issue today. The only thing the council needs to resolve is this a covered action? DWR says no. The council determined that the substantial evidence supported that conclusion. Dismiss the appeals, we're done. And you can leave out the pages and pages of the complex, hard questions about the relationship between CEQA and the Delta Reform Act and the other things like that, and just focus on the minimum necessary to resolve the actual issue before you. Because I think those what I take as council and staff seriously confronting those questions about piecemealing, I think those look very different if what you have before you is a covered action that is part of a larger project, but is in itself a covered action, as opposed to what you have before you with the proposed geotech, which is not a covered action. And so defer the piecemealing question until you actually have that issue squarely before you in a covered action, as opposed to, where we are today. Hopefully that clarifies my comment.
I would just note that it had to be clarified in this decision because it was raised by the appellants. So in order to educate the council, the facts are necessary. So I respectfully just disagree with that. I just want to differentiate between the facts and the determination. The facts that were raised were clarified which is this role of CEQA, which is a really important question that was raised. And I do think that part of the council's duty is to be educated on those very facts that Mr. Aguilar just explained in terms of what is CEQA versus what is the Delta Plan. So I do think that the state of California benefits from that distinction being very clear from the perspective of the council. So I would just say that these are important pieces of information that indeed do belong in our attempt to really educate and understand the limits of the Delta Plan. So I don't mean to debate with you, but it was raised by the appellants. And I think it's important that then they were addressed by the council. So I appreciate it.
Fair enough, and I
Thank you.
appreciate that.
I think we're going to have to
Yeah,
move
sorry.
on.
Thank
Sorry.
you.
Thank you.
I appreciate your comments, so thanks. Emma?
Our next comment is from Dan Nomalini Jr. with the South Delta Water Agency.
Good morning, council members. I was hoping I had 5 minutes. So 3 minutes, I could barely get anywhere, but I'm going to be extremely brief. My name is Dan Nomalini Jr. I'm the attorney with the South Delta Water Agency. And whether that opinion is an advisory or decision or not, it has some of the worst legal analysis I've seen regarding the CEQA. So I have to address it, and I'm going to address it. And we've submitted detailed written comments directly on the CEQA issue, and how to say that the whole of the action doesn't apply to me as an attorney is just completely ridiculous. But I don't have time to get into that. So I wanted to say the draft decision correctly rejects, and I know council, you said you're not rejecting anything, but in effect you are rejecting DWR's attempt to certify as geotechnical activities. However, your rejection was for the wrong reason. And to cut to the chase, the correct reason to reject DWR certification is because DWR has improperly attempted to certify a bite-sized piece of its Delta Conveyance project rather than the entire Delta Conveyance project as a whole. The legislature has made it clear by adopting CEQA's definition of a project that bite-sized pieces of a covered action cannot be certified. Instead, the legislature has directed that the whole of the action that makes up the covered action must be certified together before any piece of that covered action can be implemented. In the draft decision, your staff, however, is recommending that you do the direct opposite of what the legislature has directed you to do. It is recommending that you completely disregard the legislature's intent and directive and allow DWR and all other project proponents to chop up a covered action into as many pieces as they want. And I would like to explain why that is bad, but I don't have time. But the draft decision's recommendation that you completely disregard the legislature's intent and directive is a major problem for 2 reasons. First, the council absolutely and unequivocally has no authority whatsoever to completely disregard the legislature's intent and directive. You simply can't do that. The second reason is if you accept your staff's recommendation and agree to completely disregard the legislature's intent and directive, then you are embarking upon a new approach that has not yet been fully vetted. This is what the prior speaker mentioned. You are now breaking new ground, going on an approach that deviates from the legislature's approach that was vetted through the legislative process, and that is the whole of the action of the covered action must be addressed and certified before they start implementing any piece of it. So you're in an uncharted territory here. I can't believe 3 minutes is nothing, but I don't think any of you, honestly, the members, understand the pros and cons of this new approach of chopping things up versus the legislature's approach. And you are the council members, you're the stewards of the Delta. You should understand that. There's nothing in the draft decision to help you to look at the pros and cons of what you're doing versus the legislature. And I would love to talk more, but we recommend you do not approve the draft decision. We recommend that you send it back to your staff with directions to follow the legislature's approach and prohibit chopping up the covered actions into pieces. And finally, and lastly, and thank you for the time, to the extent you believe your new approach is better than the legislature's approach, which is fair game, you may have a better approach. then we recommend that you request that the legislature modify its approach to conform to your approach. I'm from Stockton. I don't know where North is, but that legislative branch is close by, and that's where you change the law. There are sometimes good reasons to change the law. If you think it's a good reason, I think what you're doing is a terrible reason, but there is a process to change the law. So thank you. If there's any questions or.
Our next public comment is from Linda Lacey with the Sacramento Area Sewer District, Sacramento County Water Agency, and City of Stockton.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Madam Chair and council members. Lucinda Lacey on behalf of County of Sacramento, Sacramento County Water Agency, Sacramento Area Sewer District, and City of Stockton. I join in the comments by Mr. Busher, and I will not repeat those. He stole my thunder a little bit there, I'll just be honest. But I did want to just mention a couple of other things. Council Member Miller, as to your question with regards to whether the CEQA issue needed to be decided, on behalf of our clients, we actually initially just argued that DWR acknowledges this is not a covered action. The council should find it is not a covered action. We agree it is not a covered action, and therefore the appeal should be dismissed. We, in the alternative, argued that should the council find that it is a covered action, there's also this issue with regards to the fact that this is kind of piecemealing under CEQA, and therefore not a project within the definition of 85225. So it was an alternative argument for us. And to that point, generally, when courts dismiss appeals for lack of jurisdiction, they focus on the narrow and limited question that reaches that decision. So I'm just going to give an example. It's a conjunctive rule. It's A is A if you find B and C. If you don't find C, A does not equal A. Here, in order for the appeals to be denied, the council would have to find that one of those factors were not found. Instead, here, what we have is that the jurisdiction of the council pertains to a covered action. If it is not determined to be a covered action, there is none of the other elements before you, whether it's a proposed project, is necessary to be decided because it's a conjunctive rule. You need all subparts. If you do not find one subpart to be true, you do not have jurisdiction. Here you found it is not a covered action. That equals no jurisdiction. There is therefore no reason to go into this analysis of CEQA. I also just wanted to briefly object to the staff presentation in terms of the statements of this will have valuable data, it will create important information, that these geotechnical activities have those merits to them. That essentially is a mouthpiece as to how DWR is describing this. I also do agree that this CEQA analysis is academic and hypothetical. And I did want to refer the council to our written comments that were submitted yesterday that go into this in much greater detail. And to the extent the council has any questions, I'm happy to answer those. Thank you.
Our next comment is from Carrie Buckman with the Department of Water Resources.
Good morning, Chair Lee and members of the council. We appreciate the time and effort that the DSC staff have put into the hearing process and the draft staff determination. We agree with the conclusion that the 24-26 proposed geotechnical activities are not a covered action. Although the geotechnical activities are not a covered action, they are important. The 2024-26 proposed geotechnical activities are expected to yield important information about soil properties and water quality. The data will, in turn, inform the planning and permitting decisions that are required before DWR could implement the Delta Conveyance Project. We have reviewed the comment letters that the DSC received on the draft determination, but we do not see any new issues, and we don't think that we need to reiterate the discussions from the prior hearing. As noted in the draft staff determination, the conclusions only apply to the 24-26 proposed geotechnical activities. We know that DWR needs to continue working toward the development and submission of a future certification of consistency for the Delta Conveyance project as a whole. As planning and design move forward, we will continue to reach out to interested parties in efforts to provide opportunities for consultation and to attempt to resolve concerns regarding the Delta Conveyance project. Thank you again for your time and attention to this matter. We respectfully request that the council adopt the draft staff determination for the 24-26 proposed geotechnical activities.
Our next public comment is from Bruce Blodgett with the Delta Protection Commission online. You should be able to speak now.
All right, can you hear me there?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much. Just a point that needs to be brought up. When Councilmember Burgess was starting to ask her questions, we froze up. The meeting froze up. All I had was a picture. I could see Councilmember Zingali at his meeting location and eating snacks, but that's all I had. So I didn't hear anything after Councilmember Burgess started asking her
Bruce, you
question.
missed a lot.
let
It was
alone-
really good, important stuff.
Yeah, I understand, but we didn't get, those of us that are online, and I'm at the office here in West Sacramento, those of us are online. I have colleagues that were online, all said the same thing. We didn't get to hear your question, nor the answer, nor the question that Councilmember Miller did. So there's a problem here in that a lot of the information going out to the public didn't get to us in this world. So I need to make you aware of that. I think there's a serious issue with that in terms of not being able to hear the end of the questions, not being able to hear the questions, and the ability to respond to those and hear those answers. So
Thanks, Bruce. Yeah, this is Julie. We realized that there was a technical issue, so we took a short break. I think that we had answered Diane's question.
not online.
That he missed. Yeah, so that it was right after her question that we realized that the internet had gone out. So
Yeah,
we took a break. So there weren't any other questions other than the one Gail asked, which I believe we were back online for Jorge's answer. So do you think we should recap maybe what Diane's question was and then make sure everybody understood what was missed there?
That was my suggestion, is we kind of need to go back to what those questions were and what those answers, and again, you did pick up right where Ore was answering the question for Councilmember Miller, but I didn't even hear what the question was. So it was out of reference there. So need to make you aware of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce, for bringing that to our attention. We do have a court reporter, so I don't know if the court reporter can read back, if possible, the question from Diane Burgess.
Perfect.
And then the answer.
This is the court reporter?
Yes.
Okay. We're doing an electronic recording, so there's no way for me without stopping the recording and playing it back to find that answer. It will be evident in the record once the transcript is produced if the question was online. I too experienced technical difficulties, so I heard what the online audience heard.
In an abundance of caution, then I would just, I think we can probably summarize your question. If you want to repeat your question, Diane, if you remember it, I do remember it because you asked me specifically what this means if we're making the decision on the Delta Conveyance project.
Go ahead, and if I disagree with you, I will do so.
If comments were part of the record.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if I recall your question correctly, you asked me if in our decision here, we're making any findings specific to the Delta Conveyance project, or we're saying anything about the Delta Conveyance project. And what I explained was that
What I asked was the recommendation is that we determine that it's not a covered action, but do the comments on the appeal items, all the different things that they said were not consistent, does that go on the record in the future? That was my question.
Okay, so a couple of things. So that would, if the council adopts the decision, so what the council did was they made specific findings to determine whether or not this activity constituted a cover action. The staff went policy by policy, and then they addressed the policy cover this kind of activity. That would be, if the council were to adopt that decision, that would be part of the council's decision. However, in none of those, the determinations, they address the Delta Conveyance project or other activities that are not specifically described in the proposed geotechnical activities certification.
Right, and I just referenced page 24 of the projection, slide deck, that it said no further findings, no findings with respect to the Delta Conveyance Plans project, no findings with respect to geotechnical activities that are not part of the certification. So I was just trying to see if similar to what was being said in our public comments that we're going to continue with, they were saying since this is not a covered action, we don't need to go any further. And so that was why I was asking, do those other comments stay on the record so that in the future, those things can be used?
Well, certainly those findings were frankly the predicate for the council's determination that this is not a covered action. So those were necessary to the finding. So those would be part of the decision insofar as you're referencing the regulatory policies and whether or not they cover the proposed geotechnical activities. That would be part of the decision of this council. So, but that is those findings. In order to make the finding, that's not a covered action. And as I understand what the commenters are saying is that we don't need to go any further, but they do agree that we can make the decision that it's not a covered action.
Right.
All that does is explain why we're finding it's not a covered action, because it's the necessary predicate.
Yeah, I think it's similar to what DWR said, is they didn't think it was a covered action, but they needed to go forward just to see. And so then those that are appealing said, no, this isn't a covered action, but if you're going to go further, this is why it doesn't work. And so what I'm hearing is it's not a covered action, so we don't need to go any further. And that's kind of why I'm asking about going further on the comments related to the second part of the argument.
Understood. Okay, yes, and to be clear, the staff did wrestle with a couple of policies were challenged, so staff had to look at those very closely.
You were in the same boat as everybody else. If, then, but if this, then that. And so that's what you are all doing, and that's what everybody's doing.
Thank you, Bruce, for bringing that to our attention. So I'll get back to the public comment portion, and I want to circle back with Bruce if he's still online. Oh, and Gail's question was to clarify the CEQA role versus our regulatory role, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and then I think we didn't start until we knew we were online. So your answer addressed her question, which was, am I saying that right? Okay. Clarifying the difference, I guess, between the CEQA regulatory process and our regulatory process.
That's correct.
Okay. And then is Bruce still on?
He is, yes.
Okay, I think we should just restart the timer for him in case he wants to make a public comment related to the draft determination, because I think his comment before was just bringing into our attention our technical glitch and what they'd missed. So thanks, Bruce.
You should be able to speak now.
All right, thank you. I just would agree with the comments that have already been expressed, expressing concern on this project. So I won't belabor those points. Mr. Nomalini made a lot of those points there. This seems to be an action that should be done by the legislature, not by the council there. So we'll leave it at that, but appreciate the opportunity to just let you know that we had an issue on this end and trying to listen to the meeting and get all of the information out of the meeting. But I'll leave those comments that people have already made them, and rather than belabor that point, let you go and get on with the next comment.
Thank you for your comment. Our next comment is from Tom Keeling.
Good morning, Tom Keeling, and I represent the County of San Joaquin. A few weeks ago, my colleague, Ms. Meserve, and I appeared before you, arguing that the bundle of activities presented to you for consideration by DWR did not constitute a covered action, and that therefore this council lacks jurisdiction to proceed any further. We appreciate very much the attention given to the arguments, and we appreciate the conclusion of the draft decision, which is exactly consistent with what we argued. And we do agree that the appeals should be dismissed because this is not a covered action. However, and by the way, I do want to adopt and join in the comments of Mr. Buscher for the record. We were confused when we read the opinion. On page 1, in fact, in the first paragraph of the draft decision, it states, when the council determines on appeal of a certification of consistency that the proposed action is not a covered action, the council's review authority at that point ends and no further findings are made. We were stunned to find 30+ pages after that statement. The entire decision should have stopped right there. Because what happens, as any judge knows, when you try to go beyond the matter before you, you end up writing dicta, an advisory opinion, which comes back to create problems later. In this case, as other speakers have indicated, the advisory opinion, the dicta that follows that statement, creates a number of problems. By the way, we never argued that CEQA governs consistency determinations. I'm going back to the original part. That was never our argument. The Delta Reform Act requires that a covered action be a project under CEQA as defined in the Public Resources Code. The definition of a covered action references and thus incorporates CEQA statutory definition of a project. That was the argument we were making. And there were other arguments among the appellants, but we don't even need to go there. DWR submitted this admitting that it was not a covered action, as has been pointed out. At that point, 5 minutes into the analysis, this council should have said, we lack jurisdiction. We're not even having a meeting or a hearing, and we're not issuing a decision. Thank you, dismissed, goodbye. And I appreciate your attention. Any questions? I wasn't too ambiguous. All right, thank you.
Our next public comment is from Ivan Sinok.
Good day, Council, Chair. I'm here before you as a citizen of the Delta, a citizen of California, and I first want to appreciate the decision of this council that this is not a covered action. But I also want to reaffirm that the council's responsibility as an independent government agency is to protect the cultural and natural resources of this Delta. A tribal representative spoke of the impacts to tribal communities, and I spoke of the impacts of residents and the other communities within the Delta. To this, I ask if DWR knew that the proposed geotech was not a covered action and that it is now determined it is not a covered action, could the council staff explain to the public and to myself and to the council of what consultations took place, why they took place, and what was discussed? Thank you for your continued protection of our shared resource, and we hope to see you all out and enjoying the Delta soon.
Thank you for your comment. Our next comment is from Kyle Griffith. Online, you should be able to speak now.
Good morning, members of the council. My name is Kyle Griffith. I'm speaking on behalf of Californians for Water Security, a statewide coalition formed in support of the Delta Conveyance Project. We just wanted to express our support for the draft determination on the appeal of DWR's geotechnical activities. As you know, major infrastructure projects like this require the collection of data, and the geotechnical work was an integral part of that process. I'm not an engineer, but it seems like common sense that we should know whether or not the soil is appropriate to move forward with this project. The draft, we're all in favor of protecting the Delta and upholding the co-equal goals, and it seems that DWR was acting within the guidelines of the Delta Reform Act. I'm sure they're going to be back to file the appropriate certifications of consistency when the time is appropriate. But for now, we appreciate the council for your draft determination and allowing this critical work to continue. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next comment is from Chris Wilson. You should be able to speak now.
Good morning. My name is Chris Wilson on behalf of the Los Angeles County Business Federation. We want to first thank the council for allowing geotechnical activities to move forward. BISFED has been on the forefront of permitting reforms, working to reduce barriers to projects like the DCP moving forward. We've seen how regulatory hurdles and lawsuits can slow things down to the point where they can stop immediately. The Delta Conveyance Project is an important project for Southern California's water security. It helps prepare for climate change, which is very front of mind for us all in the LA area at the moment. Knowing that the state water project will be able to continue providing water to our region will help the businesses and communities that we represent to continue to grow and thrive. To be clear, Southern California is investing heavily in local supplies as well, but the DCP is still a part of our long-term planning. This ruling is common sense, and we appreciate the council has heard our perspective on why the appeal should be dismissed. Thank you, and we look forward to the DCP being built in the future.
Thank you for your comment. Our next comment is from Charles Wilson online. You should be able to speak now.
Thank you, council. This is Charlie Wilson, no relation to Chris Wilson, although he could be my brother from another mother. I am one of those common voices, I think, today as a non-engineer, non-lawyer. And as I listen to the discussion and review what you have before you, the key elements to this really is around that geotechnical investigation and why the necessity of those investigations for scientific and engineering data is so critical for evaluating the feasibility and the impacts of the Delta Conveyance project. Rejecting the appeal would ensure that project planning could proceed on sound data and an analysis consistent with this council's commitment to transparency and science-based decision-making. You've gone to extraordinary lengths, as was outlined in the staff presentation, in reviewing public comment and considering stakeholder input as part of your deliberation process. And while concerns are noted, the limited and temporary nature of the geotechnical activity clearly does not substantiate the claims of significant inconsistency with the Delta plan. Now, in your role in providing a more reliable water supply for all of California and protecting, restoring, and enhancing the Delta ecosystem, allowing geotechnical investigations supports both goals by ensuring an informed planning and project evaluation. And again, as I'm not an attorney, maybe I should be, given the amount of time a lot of folks are using on lawyers and spending lots of dollars here, the council's draft determination adheres to a legal procedure requirements as outlined in the Delta Reform Act, as I see it. The decision reflects a balanced consideration of the evidence and the Delta plan's overachieving goals and policies. And as a result, we support the staff's recommended action today. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next comment is from Robin Durston online. You should be able to speak now.
I'm calling in as a concerned citizen. Thank you for your findings that geotechnical drilling is not consistent with the Delta plan. Just remind you that the construction of this tunnel will destroy the Delta, and there's not enough water. The seawater will come in, water quality will be destroyed, harmful algae will grow, and it destroys the farmland and all the local economies of the whole entire Delta and all the ecosystem and the fish. It destroys the fishing industry. I think the LA area, they had a lot of water last year. They could have built reservoirs and they would have had plenty of water to fight the fires. And we don't need to, we have the aqueduct, but they don't need a huge tunnel that's going to destroy the Delta to take all the water and let San Joaquin Valley, they won't have enough water for their farmers. And the Northern California farmers won't have enough water either. So please stop the construction of the tunnel. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next comment is from Ken Bakedi. You should be able to speak now.
Yeah, it's Kenneth Pachetti. Good morning. My name is, again, Kenneth Pachetti. I'm the president of the California Striped Bass Association, Ileton Delta chapter. I'm asking that the Delta Stewardship Council, I'm asking them to promote the protection and restoration of the Delta and not to further the agenda of the destructive and expensive water projects such as the Delta Tunnel. The preservation of the Delta and its fisheries needs your support to protect the Delta's future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment. Our next comment is from Daniel Bacher. You should be able to speak now.
Hi, my name's Daniel Bacher, and I'm an independent journalist. And I wanted to make 2 points here. The first is I wanted to thank the council for a decision that the geotechnical drilling for the Delta Conveyance Project isn't consistent with the Delta plan. Second, I urge you to oppose the Delta Tunnel because it would only exacerbate the unprecedented environmental crisis that Central Valley salmon and Delta fish populations are now in due to water export from the Delta and other factors, including pollution, toxics, and invasive species. I wanted to let the council know that zero Delta smelt, an indicator species that's been villainized by Donald Trump and his agribusiness allies for supposedly being a worthless fish, have been caught in the CDFW's fall midwater trawl surveying the Delta for the 7th year in a row. Again, that's 7 years they haven't caught any Delta smelt in that survey. It is significant that zero Delta smelt were caught in the survey because despite the release of tens of thousands of hatchery-raised Delta smelt into the Delta over the past few years by the state and federal governments. Other fish populations in this survey showed a decline from last year. The 2024 Abundance Index for striped bass and introduced game fish was 136, representing a 49% decrease from last year's index. The index was 175 for longfin smelt, a native species, representing a 62% decrease from last year's index. And these are all already very low numbers of fish that are being surveyed. The index for American shad and introduced game fish was 1,341. That represents a 45% decrease from last year's index. And the index for Sacramento split tails, as it has been for many years, just like the Delta smelt, is zero, with zero fish caught in this survey that's been conducted since 1967. It was only the threadfin shad, an introduced forage fish, that showed an increase from last year's dismal index so they had a 12% increase. By taking more water out of the Sacramento River and Hood and Clarksburg, before it flows through the Delta Tunnel would only exacerbate the extreme ecological crisis the Delta is now in. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next comment is from Roger Mammon. You should be able to speak now.
Good morning. My name is Roger Mammon. I'm the president of the West Delta chapter of the California Striped Bass Association. I'm also secretary of Restore the Delta. I want to thank you for your determination on the geotechnical application from DWR. And I wanted to point out something. I else and echo Mr. Bakker's comments about the co-equal goals. And when they say co-equal, it always seems like the people that reside up here in Northern California are disregarded even existing when it comes to the export of water. In regards to our fisheries, the biggest predator in the Delta is the pumps that take the water down south. Now, decisions on water go way beyond the Delta. They affect the coastal fishing families from Oregon all the way down to Monterey. And there has been a 2-year salmon closure, and whether or not there's going to even be a third year of salmon closure is still up in the air. But water has to flow to the Delta and has to be returned to health. It's been dying for over 5 decades since the state water project went online with the federal project. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. We have no further request to comment. I'm just going to give it a second. Yes, we have a comment from Bethy Carver online. You should be able to speak now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. I have a comment about the transparency of this geotechnical testing is that the historic nature of what Metropolitan Water District does is they did this in Moreno Valley and some parts of Owens Valley and other places. They go in with a pipe and they take the groundwater. They're transferring water from one place to another with a pipe, and they take the groundwater as they go. So this is part of the reason they're testing the groundwater, the aquifer water. They want to find out where is the aquifer from the Sierras. That water comes from the Sierras and transfers through the valley to the West Delta. And all of the millions of people that live here receive that water. So Metropolitan Water District wants that water specifically. That's what they're going for. That's what the whole thing is about. They're already receiving the Sacramento River water, and they're upset about the water quality that it's going through the Delta. Yet there is absolutely no efforts to clean the Delta water, almost zero. So, well, there is a little more recently, removing derelict boats, but the agricultural feedlots don't have sewer treatment plants, and there's no tank to tap sanitary districts. So we do have recycled water more frequently in Northern California. Southern California, Metropolitan Water District's region, their facilities have 0 tank to tap and maybe 1 or 2 recycled water facilities. Their sanitary facilities are woefully inadequate, and recently they dumped raw sewage in Orange County at the beach and the ocean. And this is done on an emergency basis regularly so they could avoid fines. So this has just been going on forever. And for 60, 80 years? I don't know how long. My memory is it's been going on the whole time. So to move along is that Metropolitan Water District hasn't done anything to alleviate their water emergency. Air nets, from air nets are in use in San Francisco and around the world. Now there are boxes invented that can be used in homes. I don't think that they have a water emergency. I think that they have a lack of interest in providing anything except the tunnel. And it's being funded by the federal and state government. So this is what they're doing, and it's costing everyone in the country a lot of money to provide. I think it's been said the Resnicks are receiving the water delivery. I don't know.
Ms. Carver?
Thank
Ms.
you.
Carver, we're over time. Thank you for your comments. Appreciate you wrapping that up.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no additional public comments online, I'd like to check in with council members Ngali and make sure there's no one at his location that would like to make a public comment.
There is no one at this time. Thank you.
All right, seeing no further request for public comment in person or online. No further public comments, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Emma. We'll now close the public comment portion of this hearing, and we appreciate everyone being here and all of your comments. The council is now going to consider the proposed determination. First, I'll ask if any of the council members want to speak further before we move to motions.
Councilmember
Yes.
Zingali has his hand on.
Oh, okay. Let's go to Daniel, Councilmember Zingali, and then Councilmember Burgess also had her hand up. And did you as well?
Thank you. So I just wanted to agree with Councilmember Miller that the CEQA analysis was important, is valuable to me, just to inform me on an issue that had been raised by external parties. And maybe this is a question for you, Gail, just were you also arguing that it is vital to include it in the determination? Could you elaborate a little bit on that for me?
Is that okay, Madam Chair?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate the question. So I view part of our mandate in the plan, I also would welcome the judge's thoughts on this, is to educate ourselves. All the issues that were brought up at our last meeting, there was an opportunity for us to learn from all of the parties. I do think it's important that was brought up as part of the record. Again, I'm also not an attorney, so whoever said that, I couldn't agree with you more. But it's really important for me as I learn and try to understand that what we have in front of us creates clarity in terms of where our statutory and regulatory role begins and ends, but really importantly, that there is a whole nother process that is taking care of CEQA, because I do think that got a little bit conflated last time. So I don't know if that helps, Mr. Zingali, but that's where I really did need to be educated. And I do think it's important that it's a part of the record for us.
Yeah, I think I do understand, just on the principle of transparency. I think I also thought of you, Councilmember Damrell, not to put you on the spot, but if you do have any perspective that hasn't already been brought to this question of whether including this analysis constitutes an advisory opinion in a way that we shouldn't be doing, I'd be interested in that too. But thank you, Councilmember Miller.
Judge Damrell, do you want to opine at all on whether or not you have any issues with the way that the draft determination has been presented to us?
I am.
Wait, hold on, Judge.
I am bothered by the notion that the advisory opinion, I presume it is advisory, it is simply not conclusive. And by that I mean that the Delta Reform Act directs the council must consider the goals of the council, but there is a I don't think it goes far enough, and I really think that is a problem with the context of the reading the context of the order, and that bothers me. I don't really offer any clarification of it, but I really am concerned that the order itself does not seem to include all the possibilities, and I'm concerned about it. I'll just leave it at that. Okay.
Thank you. So I want to get back to the draft determination. Are there any other comments? Yes, Councilmember Burgess.
First of all, I want to recognize the immense amount of staff work was done by the Delta Stewardship Council staff. It all came before us before Thanksgiving. They worked hard through the holidays. There was a lot of effort put into this. And as I said earlier, this all came to us because there was a question about the order, as the judge has kind of discussed. And staff earlier, Mr. Henderson talked about what we do and who we are and the limits of what we do. And I know that Mr. Aguilar has looked at the way this was all occurred and wanted to make sure that we were able to clarify what our role was, not go over and not, be forced into something. This is not a determination related to conveyance. This is specifically related to geotech. We are not determining whether it's a covered action at this point. We are discussing whether this is a covered action. Did I say that correctly? Or no, I said it twice. We are not saying if it's consistent. We are determining if it's a covered action. See, it's so confusing, even for those of us that are right here at the table. But just for those folks that are listening, this is not, we're not saying this is consistent or not consistent. We are determining whether this comes to our body as a covered action and whether we are going to then explore if it's consistent with the Delta plan. I believe that it's not a covered action. And so we don't need to go any further. And I understand why this is such a long determination. And just also to clarify, this is a staff report. This is an advisory to this council, and we get to take that information and either reject it, accept it, change it. And that's why we have another date to revisit this if we wanted to. But the simple answer is this is not a covered action. And so we don't need to go over all of the different things that were brought up related to consistency. I think that the last sentence on page 1 says, this does not reject or approve certifications. It's pretty simple. And so in my mind, I am not an attorney, just like Gail. And so I don't know, why this has to have so much, but I know it reflects a lot of work, so I don't want to reject it. But simply, I think it could just say this, we do not determine this as a covered action, and we do not reject or approve any of the certifications, and leave it at that. That would be where I would go.
Any other comments? Yes, Councilmember Huesa.
I think everything has been said, and I don't think there's much to debate here, but I just feel compelled to just raise a few comments, given my experience, not only as a former coastal commissioner and a former council member and member of a water board and of various quasi-judicial bodies. And just simply having been part of some that have been already established for close to 50 years or 50 years, I think it's very important to note that regulatory bodies set precedents. Decisions that become precedents become process. And if you set conflicting precedents, it really makes it impossible to ever adjudicate decisions in the future. And I think this is one of those occasions where, because we're reviewing a project that is very controversial, or we plan to review, or if it ever comes to this, this is a very controversial project. It's going to have lots of resources behind the opposition, that this promises to, or potentially create precedents in this body that will have effects on other projects and the commission's ability to objectively review those projects. And so it's only a comment in terms of some of the comments that were made, that this, that it's no need to expand or just say yes or no. I think it's important to state that precedents will affect this commission's ability to function in the future, and have an impediment in achieving its mission to protect the Delta. And this could affect people on both sides. If you consider that this project and what it's proposing in the geotechnical side has impacts that are much less than some other operations in the Delta that on an ongoing basis are affecting archaeological resources, the movement of land, in the regular process of doing what they do in the Delta. Let's say, for example, farming does tilling, farming does movement of water. Historically, farmers have been the ones to discover a wide amount of archaeological resources just simply by farming. Whether you dig a water well, or you create canals, or you till, or you move land, these decisions could affect farmers. They could affect other businesses, and it could create a process that is so difficult to follow and bureaucratic that the average person will not be able to participate in this process. And that concerns me a lot, because I have never, having served in the legislature and political bodies, I've never seen anybody say, I want to work to create a more bureaucratic process. I want to make it more difficult for people to participate in this process. I've never seen that. And that's been one of the biggest criticisms of our government. And while I share the view with most Californians that the environment is important, we need to protect it, but we also need to create processes that are fair and that help us achieve our objectives. And one of those can be protecting the environment. And if we create processes that make it hard to protect the environment, it goes contrary to the purpose. And so I just wanted to make that comment on the record, because that was my biggest concern coming into this decision. And overwhelmingly, I see a lot of confusion in this process. Confusion on behalf of the opposition, confusion on behalf of the board, and that also gives me the confusion on behalf of the speakers that are calling in, making comments that are not related to this action. That is also of concern to me, in that when processes become so confusing, even members of the public really miss the point and understand what really they're coming in to comment about. And so I think it's appropriate, and I think it's the right thing to do to adopt the staff resolution, adopt resolution 2025-01, and I would move to do that today if appropriate, Madam Chair.
Okay, I'll second.
I want to read something first before we jump to the motion, just to make sure that we are wording the motion properly. And I want to thank you for your comments to Councilmember Hueso, because I think it really goes to the fact that this is a public process. And if we were handed a draft determination that just simply said this is not a covered action, I think everyone would have had a lot of questions about that, including these council members. And it would have been a little bit insulting to the folks that prepared appeals, and to the department that turned in the work there, and to the council members that have shown up here, just to have a draft determination come from staff with something as simple as this is not a covered action. So, you know, we exist here in the public process. All of our deliberations are in public. And due to our ex parte, you know, considerations, it's important that these discussions happen in public. And I think it's important that the draft determination went into the amount of detail that it did. And even, you know, some folks say maybe that wasn't enough detail. So, you know, we have kind of differing opinions on that as well. But getting back to the resolution, I think what we want to do is make sure that staff has the ability to make any technical changes to it. So I'm going to read a little bit here and then we'll take a motion. So this resolution authorizes and directs the executive officer or their delegee to incorporate any modifications to the draft determination decision number D20242 that were approved by the council and read into the record during the agenda item for this matter at the January 23rd, 2025 council meeting. The resolution would adopt the draft determination, decision number D20242, attachment 1 to the resolution, and the findings therein, except for any modifications approved by the council and read into the record, which we are not proposing to make any modifications. And this resolution would also authorize and direct the executive officer or their delegee to finalize the draft determination decision number D20242, including any necessary non-substantive changes. And I'm reading from the bottom of page 2 of the resolution, Diane. It's not in the draft determination, it's the resolution itself. Yeah.
I'm reading all the two.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm kind of going through it. One of the, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but one of the things that I'm asking is why do we have to have so much? Can't we simply just say this is not a covered action?
I guess we'll let any council members chime in, but I feel like we need the explanation as part of the record. That's my opinion.
Just to be clear, Councilmember Burgess, that I understand your question. Are you saying the part of the decision, are you referring to the part of the decision that addresses, as was brought up, the CEQA portion? Or because there's really two parts of the decision. There's a part where it really looks to whether it's not a covered action and makes the findings necessary to reach that conclusion. Right. Are you including that too, or I'm not sure. I want to be very clear.
I came in here with no agenda as far as, you know, I understood. What I'm trying to figure out is what is the purpose of such a long, and I guess what you're trying to do is to kind of define where we are in this kind of process, particularly when we're talking about piecemealing and CEQA and all of those things. The other part of it was the comments related to consistency and certification. So that you know, when with the staff report and all of that. So those are I'm trying to simplify what the public hears from us related to this.
I'd like to follow along this conversation. I'm a little bit lost because from my understanding, we're adopting the resolution, which is this document here.
Correct.
What specific language is at odds or are we debating of this document?
I'll ask Member Burgess to ask what she would like changed.
I've been looking at the staff report all this time, so thank you.
It adopts the proposed determination. Correct. So I guess the question maybe is there wording in the draft determination that somebody would like to see changed? And then is there any wording in the resolution itself that anyone would like to see changed?
So we're talking about the determination, the draft determination.
I think both documents, right? We would be adopting the resolution, which is the 3-page document that adopts the proposed determination.
Yeah, I just don't see anything wrong with that.
Okay. So
the body of the context of the document?
Yeah, so
Yes.
it would be the resolution and the draft determination. It would be adopting those. So that would be our response. And I guess the summary, I really like the summary of the draft determination. I think it's a simple way for anyone that wants to know what we decided. It's there in the decision. It's one paragraph, and the rest of it is kind of how we came to that conclusion, the public part of how we came to that conclusion. So I'll ask members, in the interest of time, is there any edits that anyone thinks needs to happen to the draft determination or the resolution? And if not, then I would entertain a motion.
I would make a motion to adopt the resolution and the draft determination.
And I'll second.
All right, so I have a motion, and I'm going to read this again just into the record one more time to make sure that I am doing it legally. A motion to adopt the resolution, adopt the proposed determination and the findings contained therein, and dismiss the appeals as set forth in the proposed determination, and direct staff to make such non-substantive grammatical and formatting changes as are necessary to create the final version of the determination document. Emma, can we have a roll call vote?
Councilmember Burgess.
Yes.
Councilmember Burgess, aye. Councilmember Damrell. Damrell, aye. Councilmember Waso.
Aye.
Waso, aye. Councilmember Miller.
Aye.
Councilmember Miller, aye. Councilmember Zingali.
Aye.
Councilmember Zingali, aye. Chair Lee.
Aye.
Chair Lee, aye. The ayes have it.
Thank you, and the motion passes. I want to once again thank everyone for their time, and I want to be clear kind of about what we've done here. The council has found that the 2024 through 2026 proposed geotechnical activities are not a covered action because they are not covered by a Delta Plan regulatory policy. Accordingly, the appeals are being dismissed for lack of jurisdiction. This decision does not make any findings with respect to the Delta Conveyance Project, nor the geotechnical activities that are not the subject of this certification, and does not constitute approval or rejection of that project. Except as expressly provided in the decision, the department meaning DWR, must file a certificate of consistency for the Delta Conveyance Project. The ex parte communication restriction related to the 2024-2026 proposed geotechnical activities is now lifted. With respect to our administrative next steps, our clerk will certify the council's official final determination. And once that's done, council staff will transmit the certified determination via the listserv, and we'll also put it on the council's webpage for the specific covered action appeal. Again, I want to thank everyone, and we're going to adjourn this part of the hearing. We're going to go ahead and take a short 15-minute break, and then we will get back to our regular council meetings, starting with public comments that are not on the council's agenda. So just teeing that up for folks. So 15-minute break. Thank you all very much. Is Daniel back?
It's like,
Councilmember Zingali, are you back?
He's singing Elton John.
I'm here, sorry.
Thank you.
Did he hear?
Perfect.
Senator Wason?
All right.
With Elton John?
We're going to reconvene. Our next agenda item is agenda item 4. This is public comment for items not on the council's agenda. Any comments on items on the agenda need to be taken during that item. Emma, do we have any public comments for items not on today's agenda?
No, Madam Chair, we do not. I also want to check in with Councilmember Zingali to make sure there's no comments at his location.
Okay.
No, there are not.
Thank you. All right, our next agenda item is the consent calendar. We have a couple of items on the consent calendar. The first is the adoption of the December 19th, 2024 meeting summary. The second is the consideration and possible adoption of regulations relating to the Delta Ecosystem Restoration Management which is resolution 202502, which we covered at a previous meeting. Okay, I hear a motion to approve the consent calendar. Do I have a second?
Second.
Gail Miller takes a second. Emma, can you conduct a roll call vote? Oh, hang on, wait, I screwed that up. I'm gonna correct myself. Dagnabbit. Before we vote, are there any public comments on items on the consent calendar?
No, Madam Chair, there are not.
All right, thank you. All right, so we have our motion to approve and our second, so we will now proceed with the roll call vote.
Councilmember Burgess.
Aye.
Burgess, aye. Councilmember Damrell. Damrell, aye. Councilmember Waso. Waso, aye. Councilmember Miller.
Aye.
Miller, aye. Councilmember Zingali.
Aye.
Zingali, aye. Chair Lee.
Aye.
Chair Lee, aye. The motion passes.
Thank you very much. Our next item is the chair's report. I think I just want to do a little bit of a look forward. I think this spring, Brandon and our legislative director and I are going to resume some of our meetings with elected officials, and we'll continue to help people understand our process and understand what the authority of the council does and doesn't do. I think this hearing was a good example of trying to help clarify, what we can and can't do. So I'm looking forward to that very much. Also, we're sending our thoughts and hopefully some of our money down to the people in LA with the fires. I know that they've, impacted people here that we work with, and just lots of people down in LA. And I think it serves to reinforce the importance of the science work that we do here and dealing with climate change and making good policy about these things, because we're going to continue to see the impacts of climate change as we go forward. And I just appreciate all of the work that this council does in our science program, especially related to those types of issues. And Lisa Marie was sharing with us before the meeting, a year ago, we were worrying about flooding down south. And now here we are, with kind of the opposite problem. And that seems to be the trend. So we just want to keep all of those in LA in our thoughts and do everything that we can do to support them as well. I'll ask if there's any other members that have anything that they'd like to add to the chair report. Yes, Member Burgess.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to let you know that we were really excited at the Delta Protection Commission to be notified on January 16th that our management plan for the Sacramento San Joaquin Delta National Heritage Area was approved by the National Park Services. So we will be moving forward, and I will be back in Washington, D.C. with our folks to advocate for our first natural heritage area in California.
Awesome. That's terrific. Congratulations. I'm looking forward to attending the meeting at the end of February for the National Heritage Area as well. And I heard some of the signs went up too, and I saw some pictures. So that's really exciting.
Some of the signs have gone up. Good things are happening.
Yes. All right. Any other comments from members? No? Okay. I'll ask if there's any public comments on this item.
There is no public comment in Sacramento. Councilmember Zingali, do you have any public comment?
No public comment here.
Great. No public comment.
All right. Our next agenda item is our executive officer report. So I'll turn it over to Jessica Pearson.
Thank you. I wanted to start off by expressing my appreciation to everyone who took the time to provide public comment this morning in writing or orally. That is a very important part of our process, and we appreciate people taking the time to do that. We do have one new certification of consistency that's been filed since our last meeting. Reclamation District 1601, in partnership with the California Department of Water Resources, consulting with California Department of Fish and Wildlife, is proposing to restore and enhance wetland and riparian habitat on Twitchell Island, which is in Sacramento County. The Twitchell Island Wetland Enhancement and Restoration Project proposes to restore wetland and riparian and shrub habitat with a 185-acre project area footprint. So the purpose of the project is to provide high quality and cost-effective habitat offsets for Delta Levee's Special Flood Control Projects Program participants. This helps them satisfy the legal requirement of no net loss of riparian habitat when they do levee work. The public review and appeal period for this certification is now open. Details are on our website under the covered action section, and the appeals period closes on February 7th. We do have a legislative update from Brandon Chapin, so I'm going to invite him to the table.
Morning, Chair and members. First, I just want to start off by congratulating Councilmember Miller and Councilmember Zingale. Last week was their Senate Rules confirmation hearings on their appointments, and they were passed out of Senate Rules on a 5-0 vote. They were not taken up this week on the Senate floor. It'll likely be next week that they'll be considered on the Senate floor. Next, if I can go to the next slide, please. So I just have on a state side, there's not a ton to report right now. The bill deadline is middle of February, so I'll have a more in-depth stateside report here soon. But I do want to just provide updates on the new chairs. On the Senate side, we have Senator Monique Limon from Santa Barbara. She's now the chair of the Senate Natural Resources Committee. And then continuing as chair of the Assembly Water, Parks and Wildlife Committee is Assemblymember Diane Pappin from San Mateo, who we provided a Delta tour late last year. And as Chair Lee mentioned, we'll be doing meet and greets with members, including Senator Limon coming up, just to familiarize her with the council and talk through what we do. Next slide, please. Turning to the federal side, there's some federal updates. Congress was really busy at the end of its session last year in December, and there have been some updates on some things that are of the council's interest. First is with abandoned and derelict vessels. You'll remember that the council took a support position on Congressman Garamendi's abandoned and derelict vessel bill in the middle of last year, and a few portions of that were included in two bills that passed at the end of the year. The first was U.S. Army Corps authorization to remove any vessel, whether it's in the right of way or not. So that's part of something that's been an issue up to this point and now allows the Army Corps to expand its ability. And it also has, well, it's not much, $10 million of an annual appropriation for the next 5 years. I will point out that's for the entire United States, not necessarily just the Delta. So still a lot of work there in terms of appropriations for removing of vessels. And then also the Water Resources Development Act has a portion where vessel owners are federally liable for any removal costs of those vessels. Another portion of Congressman Garamendi's bill was regarding federally auctioned vessels, and this was in the National Defense Authorization Act. And this is that anyone that purchases a federally auctioned vessel must show proof of liability insurance and the resources to dispose of that vessel whenever it runs out its life. Other portions of the original bill that still have not passed, and I'm sure Congressman Garamendi will likely be continuing to try to see passed, is ensuring that there's regulatory authorization for the Coast Guard and the Army Corps to develop regulations to establish what is an abandoned vessel, to make it a little more clear and easy for them to address them. This one, the other big one is the use of the oil spill trust fund and the funding from that trust fund. That's a big source of potential funding. And then also the development of an inventory for abandoned vessels for the entire country. So those are still not yet passed and still part of going through congressional machinations. The second part there at the bottom that was part of the Water Resources Development Act was, and if Chair Lee likely remembers from the Delta Plan Interagency Implementation Committee meeting late last year, was U.S. Army Corps, a change to U.S. Army Corps policy. So part of the WRDA, as it is called, is establishing that U.S. Army Corps policy is to consider water supply and conservation with any projects that it undertakes and funds. And so that's a big thing for the Delta and the importance of water supply just generally through the entire Delta levy system and Delta levies in general. We will continue to monitor how the U.S. Army Corps implements this new policy guidance from Congress, and can likely provide more updates in the future, either at a DPIC meeting or at a council meeting. With that, that is all I have for now. Like I said, I'll provide a more in-depth update on the state side in next month in February. And I'll open it up for any questions.
I have a quick question, Brandon. On the U.S. Army Corps one, did you say there was a bill that's being considered, or did something pass?
For the policy?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was passed as part of the
Passed.
Water Resources Development
Okay.
Act. So it is
That's great
officially
news.
law.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Anyone else have any questions for Brandon?
All right,
Okay,
thank you so much.
turn it back over to Jessica.
Thank you, Brandon. A couple of more brief announcements. One is the comment period on our draft Delta Adapts Climate Adaptation Plan has been extended to February 18th. More information about that, including the draft and supporting materials, can be found on our website, and comments can be sent to climatechange@deltacouncil.ca.gov. On January 10th, council staff sent a comment letter to the State Water Resources Control Board regarding their draft Sacramento Delta Bay Delta Plan updates process. The council simply offered our support to the board in their subsequent program implementation, particularly as it relates to high quality, independent, relevant scientific review. We want to be sure that they partner with us so that we can learn from whatever they choose as their path forward, and so that we can all build trust and transparency in that process and in the outcomes. So we addressed in the letter specifically where we might work more closely together to further the implementation of their process, but also the Delta Plan and the statutory co-equal goals. A couple personnel announcements before I turn it over to our comms unit. Please join me in welcoming Vivian Sue. She is our 2025 California Sea Grant Fellow. She is in the Delta Science Program's Research Funding Unit. Vivian earned a BS in Environmental Science and Management from UC Davis, where she conducted research at the Bodega Marine Lab. She also recently earned an MS in Biology from the California State University Fullerton, with a thesis examining the effects of low tide stress on predator-prey interactions. She's looking forward to exploring opportunities to enhance justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in science. Also, welcome to Nick Rollins, who joins the Science Communication Synthesis and Decision Support Unit of our Delta Science program this month. Nick recently graduated from the University of San Francisco with an MS in Environmental Management and a graduate certificate in GIS. Nick previously worked as a senior development writer at the environmental law nonprofit Earth Justice. Nick's interested in seeing how science synthesis and communication can help support effective management decisions in such a complex system as we've been discussing today. Outreach highlights and active projects lists are included in your packets this month. Science and climate-focused communication really earned top attention on the council's social media platforms last month. Two items of interest were a new San Francisco watershed estuary science issue that Delta Science program staff contributed to, and a new Delta Adapts blog, which was co-authored by council staff. So now I am going to turn it over to Abbott and Brittany, who are going to proudly present the council's annual report.
Thank you, Jessica, for that introduction. Good afternoon, Chair Lee and council members. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm Abbott Dutton. I'm the Executive Deputy over Communications. And with me today is Information Officer 2, Brittany Young, who manages the council's communications team. We're both happy to be here today to present this report to you. If we could have the presentation up. This year's theme for the annual report for 2024 is reflecting on growth and collaboration. The communications team and executive leadership felt this theme best described the reflective nature of our work last year. Next slide, please. Before we look back at 2024, let's talk about what we aim to achieve through our annual reports. Each year, the council's communications team develops a report to showcase the agency's progress toward California's co-equal goals. Staff present the annual reports at the first council meeting of the year. These presentations usually center around the report's theme, content, format, and distribution. When we presented to you last January, we heard your appreciation of Story Map's ability to bring our reports to life. So with your feedback in mind, the Council's 2024 annual report is once again hosted in a Story Map format, and it includes lots of photos, graphs, graphics, links, and interactive features. Next slide.
For those unfamiliar, a story map is a web-based application.
Yeah.
There you go. Testing. For those unfamiliar, a story map is a web-based application that allows authors to tell stories interactively and in the context of other multimedia content. For the optimal user experience, we recommend viewing the story map on a computer rather than a tablet or a smartphone. The top of the report begins with a foreword by Chair Lee, emphasizing important achievements by the Council and our partners last year. This includes the California Natural Resources Agency, Department of Water Resources, Delta Protection Commission, Delta Conservancy, just to name a few. The foreword is followed by an introduction that describes how California relies on the Delta as a hub for water, biodiversity, agriculture, infrastructure, transportation, recreation, and more, and the ways in which our agency has grown. Next, visitors reach a leadership spotlight. Next slide, please.
In 2024, the Council, its Delta Science Program, and the Delta Independent Science Board welcomed new leadership and expressed heartfelt thanks for the knowledge and relationships established by those who have moved on. We welcomed Julie Lee as Council Chair, Gail Miller as Vice Chair, Dr. Lisa Marie Wyndham Myers as Delta Lead Scientist, Dr. Inga Werner as Delta ISB Chair, and Dr. Diane McKnight as Delta ISB Chair-elect. Next slide, please.
Speaking of leaders, visitors will arrive next at an audio quote from our Executive Officer, Jessica R. Pearson, acknowledging the addition of a new unit focused on climate and environmental justice, and the hiring of our first ever Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Officer. She notes the intention of these actions and describes their subject matters as intrinsic to the Council's role and mission. Next slide, please.
And from there, the story map describes the Delta Plan as a common vision for taking on the Delta's challenges. The report reflects on our second 5-year review of the Delta Plan. It also covers public review drafts published last year, including our Tribal and Environmental Justice Issue Paper and Climate Adaptation Plan, all as important chapters in our 2024 story. Next slide.
The story map transitions into the report's science section, which begins by recognizing science communication as an essential function of our Delta Science Program. It celebrates events like the first in-person Bay Delta Science Conference since 2018, the Salinity Management Workshop, the Science for Communities Workshop, and their impact on the Delta as a whole. It promotes reports published last year to explore science's grand challenges and harmful algal bloom monitoring. Next slide, please.
The report also describes how our science program supported the best available science. Examples include facilitating peer reviews at the request of state and federal agencies like the Department of Water Resources and the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, working with the Delta Independent Science Board, and funding research and fellowships. Next slide.
Speaking of research, the report includes swipeable findings released in 2024 from research the Council funded to support decision-making related to improving early detection of and rapid response to aquatic invasive vegetation, assessing sea level rise and flooding changes in the Delta using historical water level records, and mapping the Delta's adaptation governance network. Next slide, please.
And the story concludes with remarks dedicated to closing the book on 2024 and turning the page on 2025, a year we anticipate reaching several milestones. Next slide.
Our annual reports webpage now includes a link to the 2024 story map, along with annual reports from 2019 to 2023. Starting next week, the communications and executive teams will distribute this report broadly through our website, email announcements, social media platforms, and through one-on-one connections with our colleagues, external partners, newsletter editorial teams, friends, and family members. You can consider this presentation our very first plug. We also plan to promote the report among audiences involved with the legislature, hiring, and recruitment. And in the coming months, we will monitor earned engagement. We're very happy to say that the 2023 story map met its reach goal and brought in nearly 2,000 views. That's more than double what we saw on the 2022 annual report. This is another exciting example of growth last year. Next slide, please.
Before we close, I'd like to extend a few thank yous to the council's information officer, Carly Guadagnolo, who's here with us today, and to the entire executive team, many of whom are here as well. Also, we want to thank the staff who provided photos, including the council, the Department of Water Resources, and the Department of Fish and Wildlife, especially thanking Lynn Takata for the Bay Delta Science Conference and research photos that are throughout the annual report. And last but not least, our environmental program manager, Dan Constable, who was here earlier, our new JEDI officer, Jamari Robinson Cunha, who was here, and IT specialist, Christopher Hahn. The council's annual reports are made possible by their work and by yours. So we hope you enjoy looking at the annual report for 2024. We encourage you to share it with your contacts and also on your social media channels. So thank you. That concludes our presentation, and happy to take any questions you might have.
Any questions, council members? No.
I'll just say I'm very impressed that you guys come across all my feeds all the time. And I think that not only are you good at what you do, but I can tell that the content is made from the heart and from intelligence and from interest in what you do. So I appreciate everything you do.
And I love the story map format. I mean, I think it's so much more interactive and engaging than just pushing out a PDF on a website. It's really fun to go through and like to hear people's voices. And I love the story map format. So thank you very much.
Great. Yeah, we get a lot of good feedback on the story map format as well. Plus, it includes links to our website that further explains our projects and our the steps we've made through the last year. So thank you very much.
I think the piggybacking on what you said is that sometimes whatever it is that kind of the clickbait,
yeah,
but it helps people become more curious. And it allows you to maybe expand and figure out more things so that, so I think it's very welcoming. And I think it actually, I've seen research where they say that, you can send a report out and people may or may not read it. But when you do it in the format that you're doing it, they're going to spend more time and they're going to dig deeper and they're going to have better understanding. So, yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ladies. Great job.
Thank you.
We have a hand from council members Zingali online.
Oh, yeah.
Councilmember Zingali, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, I can't see you on my screen right now, so please.
That's
just
okay, thank you.
Yell at us.
Yeah, it's all right. I just wanted to add my congratulations, and I feel the same way about the storyboard format. Great visuals. Congratulations on the earned engagement of 2,000. Glad you're emphasizing that. I did want to offer one thing from my experience that sometimes alongside highlighting our achievements and our leaders, there's a way to show the relevance of our work from the perspective of ordinary people who are affected by things like flooding and water supply and ecosystems, and just put it out there for you guys to consider in the next or future communications, bringing just some ordinary people into that highlight alongside our leaders and our achievements, their perspective on the importance of our work. That can sometimes fuel that earned engagement to surprising audiences that we might not ordinarily expect to engage.
Absolutely. Thank you for that comment.
Yeah, good advice. Okay, well, the only thing left on the agenda here is we're going to hear an abbreviated report from our Delta lead scientist, Dr. Lisa Marie Wyndham-Myers, after potential public comment on my item. You've been sitting there so patiently, but just one more minute.
Emma, do we have any public comment?
We have no public comment in Sacramento. Councilmember Zingali, do we have public comment at your location?
We do not.
All right, no public comment.
Right. So as Jessica mentioned, next we have our lead scientist report presented by Dr. Lisa Marie Wyndham-Myers.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chair Lee. It's good to be back. And this is, in fact, a very short report. Not because we haven't been busy. You'll hear a lot more in February and in March. about the Delta Science Program and some of our advances, and following on the theme of growth and collaboration, that would be us as well in the science program. So two things on the agenda to highlight are workshops that are coming up in 2 weeks. On a Thursday and Friday, there'll be a hybrid workshop on February 20th and 21st, which is registration required, but it's open to the public. And we really want to hear from people about how we can move forward on tools and strategies to implement and address the grand challenges that we identified as the theme for this year's, update to the science plan. So we do the Delta Science Plan every 5 years. It's called for in the Delta Plan. And this update, if you want to look at the previous versions, they're all available online, particularly at the link here. But the theme this time is to focus on the 5-year planning document, providing vision, principles, and approaches for coordinating Delta science and communicating the outcomes and management implications of such activities. And so we're doing this again in a way that's structured around grand challenges that we've identified. And we encourage folks to chime in so that we can release this in fall 2025. So we'll have a new science plan come next fall. And again, the link is on here and registration is required, but we again encourage broad participation. Okay, the second thing to highlight is it's more of a save the date, and that is the May 9th, 2025 Microplastics Symposium. And so this will be the 10th year running of this partnership with the Coastal Marine Science Institute at UC Davis. The theme this year is on microplastics, which are generally produced on land. And it could be through tire wear or wastewater or increasingly wildfires as sources of plastics to the system. And so the focus is on ecotoxicology of those microplastics in the system and related contaminants. And again, that will be held on the campus at UC Davis in the International Center. And more information will be available soon, but the date to hold would be May 9th. And that is it for updates for us on upcoming presentations. And we can go straight to by the numbers, which from these graphics you'll see is sort of the tale of two Californias, being pretty wet in the north and pretty dry in the south. Some things to highlight here are that the reservoirs, at least the main state federal ones, Oroville and Shasta are above average. So is San Luis. And so everything is, high enough to not warrant concern at this point. If we then start to look at precipitation patterns, though, we're going to be seeing, again, higher than average, above 109% of what you would expect for January in the north and the Northern Sierra sites, and then about half of what you would expect to see in the Central Sierra sites. This is just overall precipitation. Snowpack is one thing that most people get concerned about, and that's where we start to see 81% looks pretty good for the whole state right now for snowpack. It's not at 100, but it's not that much lower. But that's because it's 20% higher up in the Northern Sierra sites, and then in Central Sierra sites, it's reduced. And so if you look at this is in snow water equivalents, not in actual snowpack. And things are about to change this Saturday. I don't know if you see the storm coming in, but it might be as high as 8 inches in some of the higher parts of the south. And this rain, I'm sorry, I should say this rain/snow event is really focused likely in the south, in the Central Sierra and south part of the state. And then the last thing to highlight here is the water flow and quality data. And again, we were reporting inputs to the Delta from the Sacramento River to the north at Freeport. It's about 30% higher than what we normally see at this time of year. And then ironically for San Joaquin, it's it's only a third of what we would expect in the San Joaquin River. So it's highlighted in red for you just to see that is a low flow for coming in off of Vernalis off the San Joaquin into the Delta. The other thing to note there is that the salinity values they're creeping up. That's a little bit high for the San Joaquin, just an FYI. It's not alarming per se, but it's just higher than normal. And then finally, the diversion through the Central Valley Project, the State Water Project, are lower than we normally do at this time of year. It's actually lower than we have in the summer as well. So these numbers are really telling a story of two different parts of the state coming together here in the Delta. And I think we'll see what happens this weekend.
Yes, and Councilmember Burgess.
Do you have any idea or do you understand, do you know why the salinity is so high?
Well, the one that makes the most, it's only the Vernalis,
Right.
It's the low flows.
It's the low flows?
Yeah. So it's a
So
dilution
it's kind of,
aspect. It's not being diluted.
Okay. And I just also found it really fascinating. I was reading about, Florida and their groundwater issues, and that, in a state that is known for lots of water and lots of rain, they're even struggling with groundwater hazard issues, even some subsidence issues related to the beaches. And so while California has this issue, it's, they're all different, but I just found it fascinating to find out that Florida was dealing with groundwater issues.
Yes, too many to mention. So,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's snowing in New Orleans and Gulf Shores, Alabama, and it's 8 degrees at my cousin's house in Alabama. And we don't have any snow in the Central Sierras to get the snowmobile out. That's crazy.
It's very interesting.
Very interesting. Yeah. I'm sorry, Councilmember Miller, did you have a comment?
I don't, it really is helpful. Thank you. Just for the future reports in February, council members Ngali and I spent a lot of time talking about the science program and how proud we are of it with the state senators. And just a couple points on that. One is if we could get a progress report sometime next year on creating this open source portal so that we're all sharing the same data and what that will take and how we can really do it. And then two, as we look to our future work plan, especially vis-a-vis water supply, and what that means is one of our co-equal goals from a statewide perspective, and making sure that we are gathering input from folks around the world. Senator Grove used an example of a farmer that's been taking notes by hand, really over the better part of 70 years, and just how we can become a portal and potentially even the source of truth for all of that information. It will be, I understand that's not a today question, but I know it was one of your goals that we're just really enthusiastic about, and how we as a council can really help implement that, I think can have a significant lasting impact on the state. So look forward to working with you on that. I know it's a big ask, but hopefully over the next few months, even year, we can really see how the council can support on your goals and help you implement those. So
thank you for that. I'm sorry, Councilmember Miller, because you will hear more about some of this collaborative work that we're hoping will advance both of those goals.
Yes, Member Hueso.
And thank you for that report. I always find your reports fascinating. I love the things that you choose to report on, and some of the information you provide us that specifically impact the water delta. And what's fascinating about California is that our delta really begins in the mountains in Los Angeles, in the mountains in Oregon, the Sierra Nevada. We rarely think that water could really travel north, but it does. San Joaquin River is one of those that travels from south to north. We have a lot that travel east to west. The majority of them are east to west, but we also have the Sacramento that comes from the north. We have a few rivers that travel west to east, and they all drain into what the watershed is. And when you start thinking about an imbalance and salinity in the south, it really speaks to the fragile nature of this watershed. But when I used to chair water in the assembly, and when I visited the Sierras, they told me, this is where California's water comes from. And so I think everybody has this general feeling that water in California belongs to them, and it comes from there. And there's this idea that, water is somehow a local it is a local commodity, but under state law, nobody owns water. Water is just kind of something that passes through all of our communities. It's important to remember that. But it also is important to take that into context when we talk about the Delta, because whatever happens in the Sierras, whatever happens in the LA mountains, whatever happens in our borders, it all affects what happens here. And so that's why I think it's very important that we get these reports and that we understand what's happening in real time in our state, because it gives us an idea of what we need to plan for, what we need to think about and consider as we're making this decision. So thank you for your reports. I like to hear about the rivers and our reservoirs, because right now just one event, whether it's in Paradise, California, or in Pacific Palisades or Altadena, all that affects California's water supply and environment in such a profound way. And we can't really disconnect ourselves from that, because the Delta really connects us all statewide.
So true. Yeah. Yes, Diane.
So as a former executive director of a nonprofit that did watershed education, the easiest way to talk about a watershed was to take our hands and to put them out and then to pour water. And all these different little lines were the ones that kind of led the water to where it was. So on the definition of a watershed, is it if we create a new line that's not naturally occurring, is that considered part of the watershed? Or is it what naturally occurs?
Well, there's a term called interbasin transfers, and that's when you literally move water out of one basin to another. And I've shown this before, but there's this nice USGS water cycle map, and you can see the growing amount of interbasin transfers that we're doing as people. We do this a lot. So when I'm reporting here is just what's in the rivers, but there is a lot of interbasin transfer.
Right. Thank you.
You brought up that water or the cycle of the water map. And I remember the council looking before at past lead scientist presentations showing the whole life cycle of the water and how everything really is all connected, from the evaporation that creates the clouds that waters the Sierras, that brings it back down to the Delta, and then we ship it everywhere. Very, very interesting to look at the whole cycle. So thanks for those comments. Any other member comments? If not, we'll go to public comment. I'm sorry, were you?
I am finished. Thank you, Shirley.
Okay. Yeah, we'll go to public comment on that item.
We have no public comment in Sacramento. Councilmember Zingali, do you have any public comment?
Sorry, no public comment here.
Great. There is no public comment.
Thank you. And our last agenda item is preparation for the next council meeting, which is going to take place at the end of February and will be in West Sacramento. So please refer to our posted meeting notice for the exact date on that and for further information and updates. So with that, we are concluded. Thank you very much, everyone.